Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, although they continuously try to paint us as the extremists on this side, I would like to point out that the last sentence ushered by the last speaker demonstrates how consistently it's their side of the house, which is actually the radical extremists, and the other ones arguing that anything goes no matter what. And this was the sentence Ian ushered when he said, basically, any regulation of science actually prohibits it. And what we say is no, there's actually a complex relationship between the society and the ambitions of scientists who constantly want to push. Here on this side of the house, consistently we maintain the same principle. Let's deal with it as it comes. Let's not give a blanket allowance for all kinds of genetic building blocks that they want to say. Fundamentally, what we have to realize is what we are playing with. We are playing with the building blocks of life. And on this side of the house, we want to say we do like science, and we do think that there are many good things that can come from this science, but we must treat it with fear and trembling. We must stand in awe of the power that lands before us, and we should tread carefully on the path and not just go willy-nilly, like they say, on this side of the house. Okay, so I'm going to actually sum this round up by giving a summation of what every team said in the round. First of all, the lovely Prime Minister and his lovely, you know what I mean. Okay, so basically they stood up and they gave us some of the benefits. They showed us all the good things that come by it, and we say, great, we love all the things we're talking about. We think there's good things that can come from this. However, on this side of the house, we have to say that there is a responsibility of the society and the society's representative, which is the government, to act as a check to make sure that we don't just allow them to do whatever, but we regulate some of the things if we think that the rest of the society is actually a little uncomfortable with them. They said, Emily Cliff kept on coming up here and saying, this is not a big deal because if we have monstrosities of science, if we have, genetic diseases or things that can make us have famine, it's okay because we can just sue Monsanto afterwards and everything will be okay. Fundamentally, as first government or first opposition pointed out over and over and over again, this isn't the case. If it gets out, that might be nice. We can sue the people that did wrong. Unfortunately, the damage is done. Government does not have the brakes to go and stop this. The other thing that they consistently said over and over and over again is that knowledge for its own sake is like an intrinsic benefit. But what we see is there actually is many kinds of knowledge which we try to hide and try not to let out. We don't let everybody have access to biological weapons which can hurt people. We don't let everybody have access to nuclear technologies which can hurt people. Oftentimes we have to say we have to tread very carefully on this issue because not all knowledge for its own sake is good. And then consistently both sides, Ian Birch most specifically, but both teams, kept on coming up here and trying to tell us that there is not this big division between what we were doing then and what we're doing now. That merely playing with genes is not that much fundamentally different because it's merely the progress of what we were doing before, but just more carefully and with more precision. But what we're actually saying over and over again on this side of the house is oftentimes a difference in degree can constitute a difference in type, in that it's so fundamentally different. Why? Why is it so fundamentally different? Because nature, when you're doing this, has its own checks. It goes very slowly over the course of thousands of years, and what doesn't work oftentimes does not get through. If one species, evolves and it has a predatory instinct which enables it to conquer the rest of its environment, it will kill its food, and so it won't be able to go up very far. However, when we're actually playing with the blocks and being able to skip over all of the natural steps that evolution has to get through till it gets to kind of the point it is now, what we see is these kind of things, these aberrations are taken out, which we don't think is going to happen when we just let everything live and not put restrictions. What do you agree, Emily Cliff?
Humanity protects itself all of the time to allow itself to survive in conditions that nature wouldn't let it. You propose going back to the caves.
No, we don't. We just say, let's do this with a little bit of hesitation and choose case-by-case basis those things which we don't think there's a lot of danger because we have some understanding and we're not just going to go out. So then what did this team come up to say? What did First Op say? They said that, humans are not the only creatures which matter. That this anthropocentric perspective is not the only one, but that, all of nature is actually not uniquely the purview of human beings, which is something that on this side of the house we actually agree with a lot. They also say that things get out, and that contrary to what this side of the house would consistently insist all the time, that, if this stuff does get out, nature violently breaks through often. What you think something cannot do, were demonstrated that actually, oh my God, this thing actually got out. Things we didn't anticipate do have the power to break through. We think that this is dangerous. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't ever do that. It just means that we should treat every case carefully and evaluate the dangers of whether that is a possibility. And if it is a possibility, we should treat it, maybe with a little caution and actually have the rest of society choose whether or not we allow this and not just this narrow group of scientists. Basically, what this team is, the team in the back, I want to call them team kleptocracy, because they basically believe that society and all these decisions belong only to a narrow purview of scientists, and if this actually leads, we're going to have like total fettered science and won't be able to do anything. And the only thing I'm going to say to actually point out how stupidly ridiculous what they're saying is status quo. We actually think we see immense benefits happening in the biological sciences. Mr. Robert is able to learn all these new incredible things just with what society is doing now. Why do we think by changing everything it's going to make it better? They're acting like the current fetters that we have, involving the state and the society, is totally thwarting science in every way. This is not what's happening. What's happening with status quo is really good. We're allowing a lot to get through, but there's not, there is restrictions. When some scientists want to do stuff, the society says, we're not really comfortable with that yet. Maybe we should wait a little while, let your science get just a little bit better, and then make those decisions then. How can you disagree with that?
What about the massive roadblocks that have been put in place of stem cell development?
Oh, wait a second! That's the most beautiful thing. That's the one thing that even your side of the bench undermined your own argument with the potential dangers by saying, yeah, we're even still a little uncomfortable by humans. As if there is some kind of division between humans and the rest of the natural world that we live in. We are massively connected. That was what my partner started saying when she was talking about the example of rice. When, they said the scientists said this is, and government did not take the steps to check the scientists, but just went along with what they said, contrary to what Ian Birch said in a very confusing way. And, we made this decision, and what happened? We actually had millions of people starving in China, which we don't think. I know the chair there consistently likes to talk about potatoes and how we've got this narrow stream of potatoes, and constantly the genetic stock of potatoes is not as big. But what we think might actually come about if we do some of these things and let this stuff out is we might think for 50 years that this rice is, the best new thing. We've built new crops and new algae in the seas, but what you find 30 years later, when you did not step with fear and trembling at looking at this awesome technology, is you find that 30 years later, what we have is actually not as good as what nature had, and 30 years have gone by, and we don't actually have enough of the original stock left over. There are potential consequences which are happening here. So what did we say against kleptocracy on this side of the house? We said that there is a danger of, basic biological arms races happening. We also said that the government acts as a check to corporate science, and that oftentimes the government has to, by the sheer fact that the government having those restrictions, it acts as a check so that the scientific knowledge gets a chance to catch up. We've also said that the government represents the moral interests of the society, and as such, it's more inclusive of what everybody believes, and not just the narrow band of the scientists. So for all these reasons, you must oppose this mission.